Hello, I'm here. Someone's in the waiting room. If you join in, dig in. That is, you can start right out with some kind of question or critique or comment or anything you'd want me to talk about. It's been a productive week. I've been thinking about all sorts of things, but one thing that's on my mind is the not the learning curve, but a learning hump. Uh, that is, it's hard to get over. I lucked out in my life in that there were ways in which this hump um, were made a little easier for me, or a lot easier for me. But it's when what you assume would happen is basically when you've encountered enough ironic situations where the outcome is the opposite or different from what you expected, that you get very confused. You could say disoriented, and are trying to find new habits. And if you get enough of them, they're the source of doubt. And when you get enough of them, you start to doubt yourself, doubt whether you have the capacity to handle the doubts that you're delivered in your life, and what you do at that point. So there's a hump. I think there's a hump um, that uh, that makes it daunting to get more curious. Um, and especially if you've got a lot of stress you're dealing with in immediately, and you don't have much discretionary time, that sort of thing. Uh, and I see Trump as a catalyst for incuriosity. I see him as one of many. There have been many throughout history. I would say all sorts of versions of revelation, the sense that you've discovered the truth, are a way to avoid the hump. So any generic version of woke is I've seen the light. Um, I draw a parallel between this and rebound relationships. You know, someone hits a snag in their life, and like they lose their partner, and they lurch for another groove, another partner. Or this would also be parallel to what you see in people who go to prison and find God. So this is a way where you avoid the hump that you have to get over to get to the gradual learning curve of curiosity. I'm thinking shit up notch by notch all the time. But I'm living a very rare and rarefied life. I live in a world where I'm in effect paid for curiosity, and most people aren't. So, and not only that, I'm surrounded by people who ended up over that hump. The rare academic who is not playing learned but learning. I just happened into the luck of a few of them. Part of that is living in Berkeley. You've got people here who do that. Not all of them. A lot of academics don't do that. They were creative in their youth, and then they found what they're selling, and they became, whether they become intellectuals within an academic situation or private or public intellectuals. There's They didn't compensate for their success by more curiosity and self-doubt. They compensated by acting like they'd landed, and they don't change their mind much after that. But I lucked into a few who just stayed curious to the bending end. I have a few, one friend who had gotten really famous, um, and was curious right till 92 when he died. Um, I have a short video about him. It was Dan Ellsberg, the guy who came up with the Pentagon Papers, and before that pioneered behavioral economics. And our last conversations a few weeks before he died, he's asking me all sorts of questions, not because he considers me an authority, but because he had never lost his childlike curiosity. And then the guy I just took a dog walk with, Terry Deacon, he's 74. He's emeritus from Berkeley. He's a neuroscientist there. We've been jamming for 30 years or so. This morning we were wondering about the next thing. Our every answer was a springboard to the next question. And stupid sucks. Keep living, folks. Stupid sucks. I agree. Stupid sucks. And in a way, what I'm talking about here is is why stupid is valuable, because that hump is overwhelming. My dad was like that. He was curious to the bending in. Uh, he had uh, he had a big ego. I do too. Folks have them, but there was something about him that found more joy in insight than in what I call insight overreach. That is, thinking that you've found the solution to everything. Um, I also worked for several bosses, happened to be women in my case, who had been huge successes in business prior to my working for them. And they tended to have this attitude that they could do no wrong, which is very much the Trump attitude. It's this attitude that avoids the hump. I'm saying that there's a barrier to entry into curiosity. And once you get in the groove of curiosity, if you can afford it, and most folks can't, um, it becomes a joyride. Everyday new ideas. I live on the currency of new ideas. If I have a new idea, I can write it up and I can put it out there, and I have community that enjoys it, or at least I hear from them, and they criticize and compliment, and from both from just hearing from people, I get new ideas. So there's something I call the wordwise spiral. That is, you you're trying to you've got some new idea, you're having trouble spitting it out, you come up with some language by which you can spit it out, and that language enables you to think new thoughts. And so it becomes kind of a spiral. Your language gets better at articulating your thoughts get richer because you've got a capacity to articulate. So that's one thing that's on my mind these days. And on these siren calls that say no, just relax into your revelation. Revelation is where you'd see this most fundamentally. Is this lure away from curiosity? Um, it's very much like a rebound relationship. I once was lost, but now I'm blind. And boy, do I understand the temptation in that direction, including the temptation to say that anybody who disagrees with you is stupid. Um, I'm getting a lot of that from Trumpists these days. I love when a video takes off, and it usually takes off with Trumpists. That is, some Trumpists saw my thumbnail or my title or something like that, and they decide, oh, I can use this guy for trolling, and they come in with some absolute declaration. Last week it was word salad. This week it's TDS. They're back to that one. They tend to cycle these words. Um, and they make the pronouncement like they are the president of the American Psychology Association. Anybody who disagrees with them has Trump derangement syndrome. So they all think I'm stupid, um, including stupid because I have a PhD, which is fine. What an awful, without curiosity, unable to even consider new ideas. Yes, but one of my new ideas, is to understand why it would be so tempting, and why it would be so necessary for so many people. That is, I've got to remember that I'm like them. I'm a human being. I got the entire repertoire. So let me give you another example, catfestation of how this has played out in my life, in a different kind of situation. So I'd have a groove, I'd have a partner, and I was reliant on that partner, and then the partner would leave. In general, they would leave for someone more successful than me, and it would dog the hell out of me. Uh, and I'd spend months poring over the details of our relationship, trying to figure out basically how to get my groove back, how to feel okay by myself now that I've lost my partner. So this is prime real estate for a rebound relationship. But often I was in a place of quarantine where I couldn't quite go out and date again because I was still too messed up by the last relationship. And also, the dating world online is full of that. It's full of people who have what I call bipolar ambigamy. They're deeply romantic and deeply wary, and um, and and I would be like this too. Okay, so what would happen to the trail that was left by the absence of a partner? The plume at the end of it. What would happen ultimately is that I would take the whole tangled bolus of all of our interactions, all the tentacles we had attached to each other during the partnership, and I'd stuff them into a box. And then I'd label the box succinctly, just like super simplistically, like, well, oh, this is what happened to us. And I'd stuff that box in the attic of my memory and move on. Okay, so that's me doing the simplification move. And I think it's appropriate in that situation. Because you got to get over it. And not only that, I would pinch myself and discover that I was still here despite having lost my partner. But I think that's the move that the Trumpists are making, and not only the Trumpists, but a bunch of liberal people who write to me as well. There's a way in which we want to resolve it right away. So I'm dealing with a paradox here, which is it's hard as hell to get reoriented in a disoriented state. If you've been thrown out of your game, then that's a hell of a time to go shopping for a new game because you're desperate to find a new game. So I do not assume that all Trumpists have lived stressful, traumatic lives. I think plenty are just indulgent, and this was an advantage they could take. And nobody leaves affirmation on the table. That is, if you can find a new way to be affirmed that works for you, you'll tend to fall for it or go for it. But I am drawing a parallel nonetheless, because there's a kind of strategic gullibility or stupidity in me putting to rest the loss of a partner. It's a kind of strategic stupidity. Okay, trauma makes many shut down, and lack of curiosity is one of the symptoms. I agree, Kit. I'm with you on that. And what I'm saying in general in this work, and this is often confusing to people, is I wouldn't put it past me. That's where all of my curiosity started. I was in a very disoriented state. I was back in psychoanalysis. I was in my 30s. I had had 5 years of 4-day-a-week psychoanalysis starting at age 8. And I came off the commune where I'd been living and was totally disoriented because I was like a Trumpist who would let go of that crutch. Suddenly lost their groove. Just imagine if MAGA disappeared. These guys would be jonesing. They would be cold turkeying. They would be in lots of trouble. So whether they started out timid, they have become timid because they are tied into this great bolus called Trumpism. And the disorientation that happens after that is intense. I went into psychoanalysis, and the question was my old question, what's wrong with me? And then at some point, the question shifted, and I got curious about us all. Which is, and so one of the challenges I deal with in this work is I wouldn't put it past me. Whatever they're doing, I do to some degree or another. And at the same time, I'm not like them. So my tease about this, my koan about this, is that there's two kinds of people, those who do and those who don't recognize that we're all the same. I'm both. Because here I am distinguishing assholes or absolutists. And yet I have to keep in mind that I have their repertoire. I have their temptations. I can't do the thing I don't want to do. Whether I do it or not, I can't tell. I have no business telling you that I don't do something. But I don't want to do the thing where I stand in a place of security and talk about the people out there. I have to keep in mind that I'm a people, that I do that stuff too. And that's where this curiosity started, is that I had to realize I wanted to get interested. I wanted to figure out what's up with all of us, what the temptation is for all of us. As Hannah Arendt says, you cannot tell in advance who is going to fall for the simplification. And so I'm saying it could happen to me. It wouldn't happen to me in their lifestyle brand, obviously. It's much easier to see these human traits in other people who are our rivals or enemies or disagree with us. This was the start of my curiosity about psychoproctology in general. Is I posed the koan to myself, what is a butthead? Since it can't just be anyone I happen to butt heads with. But when you think back to how bad liberals were at predicting Trumpism, um, uh, we didn't think anybody fall for that. And I think most of that is because it was a different lifestyle brand. I've got this buddy, he's a full-time activist, and we debate this question about whether we would vote for a Trump who was on our side and agreed with us about everything and took an authoritarian stance uh, to save us from climate change. For example, this guy's a climate change activist. He's the guy who put in New York City the countdown clock on Times Square that counts down to when there's no turning back from climate change. He said that he would vote for one like that. My answer was a bit of a dodge, which is no, I wouldn't, because Trump isn't for anything. He's a panderer. So would I vote for someone who panders as though he wants that? No. Would I vote for an oligarch who's a populist oligarch? Would I vote for an Elon Musk who says freedom for all, but really means free for all because if there are no rules, he wins? No, I wouldn't. But the question remains, would you stand for someone who took full control and led us out of all of our problems as we define them? That's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question. But I'm more interested in your questions if you have any, including anything you want to talk about. You should have him on. I'd love to hear that discussion. Thank you. I'd love to. He's an interesting guy. He's an interesting guy. He was popular. He had made a name for himself. I wrote to him out of the blue as a fan. We became buddies, and he had a heartbreak. He got a cosmic wedgie. It had to do with a woman who left him, a younger woman who left him. And since then, he has not been curious, from what I can tell. It's a combination of him being a public figure. And so I keep on inviting him into conversation. And at this point, I think he finds me troublesome. In part, he finds me troublesome because I'm not convinced that love is the answer. This has been another theme this week. I keep on trying to point this out. Moves are not intrinsically good or bad. Behaviors are not intrinsically good or bad. They are situation dependent. This is central, and I get almost nowhere in making this argument. But I deal with a lot of people, because I came off this commune, I deal with a lot of people who are continuing to say that kindness and love and generosity and all of that is the answer. And I don't think it is. I think it's a question. What to love? What to be kind to? To me, those words are loaded, loose last words. Loaded meaning that they're positively loaded, they sound hella good. Load bearing as well. That is, one can rest one's identity on thinking of themselves as kind. And so this is a guy who has fed that community, the counterculture community, younger people who are still drawn to that message. And I don't think of it that way. And it's loosely defined. But if you were to try to define kindness, the closest I've been able to come is accommodation. That is, when you're kind to someone, you accommodate them. That's how you know whether someone is kind. Okay, so often we accommodate enthusiastically. That is, we're more than happy to help. Because there's something about it that we're enthusiastic about. That's that romantic early stage in partnership, is that you honestly feel like being kind. But then later on, you get into these issues about, okay, should I be honest here or kind? Because there's a trade-off. Not always, but sometimes your kindness is not honest and your honesty is not kind, or will not be perceived as kind. So Yes, bumper sticker ideologies, and a kind of a simplification down to behavior by numbers. Always do X, never do Y. Um, and yeah, it came up this week because I took on that Buddhist line about run your thoughts through three gates and don't say them unless it passes all three. Is it true? Is it honest? Is it kind? And it makes my skin crawl. Um, that's not the reality we live in for a few reasons. One is I can be as honest as I want. Honesty is not kindness. Honesty is not truth. Honesty is not truth. Obviously, lots of people honestly believe untrue things. Okay, so I don't get to speak truth to power. you know, like I've got it. I can speak honesty to power, but I don't get to claim that I have the truth, no matter how strong my convictions. Because I look around and I just see all sorts of people with really strong convictions who think they're speaking truth, and I don't think so. And we could debate it, but if they do that, what am I exempt? Somehow mine is more true. Another interesting thought for me this week. I've been thinking a lot about uh, theality. That is the feeling. Nothing is more convincing that you've got the truth than feelings. Feelings are incredibly convincing to us. We're driven by them. And so whenever people have conviction, it's likely to feel like they've seen the light, that they've got the truth. And that's what's going on with the Trumpists. And so I have to ask myself, okay, well, is there a reason why I would be exempt from that human tendency? I don't think so. Okay, so let's see. Um, let me see what we've got here. A JS podcast. I did a few for a while. I should do more. And I wanted to do one. I was going to get on all of the big names in biophilosophy, the Dan Dennett's, the Robert Sapolsky's. Dan Dennett's now dead, Stuart Kaufman's and all, and just do a Socratic thing where I got them to tell me where was the difference between life and non-life, because a lot of them dodged that question, and I wasn't going to pitch anything to them. I wanted to corner them with that question. I tried to get a few of them online. They didn't want to do it. Um, a podcast where so I'm on podcasts, and I'm going to set up a channel where I've got all the podcast interviews that have been done and recorded. I have to work out the technology of that. But anyway, yeah, it'd be fun. This is all fun for me. And it was fun before I had audience, but now I've got audience. That's like icing on the frosting. It's really sweet. Okay, let me see if I could. I'm a slow reader. Let me see what I have. Yeah, kindness can. I'm just going to pick up this last thing because it's short and on point. Kindness can amount to complicity. So kindness. I mean, the Trumpists think that they're totally kind um, because they're kind to each other. It's basically uh, don't tell me I'm unkind. I'm kind to my fellow tribesman. I think he deserves more than you, just like me. So, yeah. And then there's another thing about any of those loaded words is that they're double edged from the get go. So you've probably experienced this where someone basically says that's not nice or that's unkind when they're disappointed, when they don't want to hear what they have to say. So yeah, they all work that way. They all become easy fodder for projection. Um, uh, I had to coin the term narcissism for the narcissism of saying that's not nice to anybody who disappoints you. And when I was a dating person 10 years ago, I retired from all that stuff. I'm obviously not good for it. I'm way too mouthy for partnership. But back when I dated, I that was one of my three qualifications is you can't automatically translate ouch into you have violated a moral imperative, and you can't automatically translate I want into you owe. I might have violated a moral imperative, but that has to be a question. At some point, you can lash out at me. That'd be fine. A partner can lash out at me. I have a 5-minute rule on that for myself, which is I can lash out for 5 minutes. I'm a testy guy. But after that, I have to get to what I call the Humeist question. Is it you? Is it me? Is it us? Which has also been a theme for me this week. That is, I'm interested in blame without shame. Blaming someone, that is, you caused this, but not starting out with the moral conclusion about it. You caused this. Whether it's good or bad is a separate question. But yeah, so that's intriguing to me. I'm playing with it this week. I haven't written anything about it. Okay, let's see. Glittering generalities. Yes. Okay, I agree with that. That's what we're talking about here. Always do X, never do Y. I think of it as there are three phases, you could say. Always do X is one order of moral approach. The next is there's a time to do X and a time to do Y. There's a time to reap, the time to sow. And then the serenity prayer, which actually recognizes that there's a tension between the two of them and that we are all guessing when to do what. Love is the question. Okay. Stand up, share information, and know I exist. Okay. I I have a saying, I opine, therefore I am. Uh, that is, the way I know that I exist is by having opinions. And you see that at its strongest in any of the cults in an epidemic. Once again, I'm not interested in lifestyle brands. It's just um, to have an opinion makes you feel full, makes you feel like you've got meaning and purpose. You don't have to think about your opinion, you just have to blurt it. And I actually, once again, I see a value in that for human beings. I consider it a major form of egotainment that I endorse. So tonight I'm going to hang out with a friend of mine who's into wine. Got all sorts of opinions about wine. Now, I'm not interested in libation that way. Drinks don't interest me. But boy, do I get this thing about having an opinion about stuff like that as a way of reassuring oneself. I do the same thing, just in a different domain. I just don't happen to be interested in wine. But it's a form of egotainment. And I've also, through this idea of egotainment, I've come to see entertainment as a human necessity. It sits in this strange place. It's kind of considered like an extracurricular activity, but I think that's mostly because we don't want to admit how needy we are for that kind of affirmation. Uh, so, I happen to get it through watching TV, jerking off, or off jerking, as I put it. My main objection, really my only issue with the Trumpists is self love like that is important, but get a room. Don't let it go to your head, and don't turn basic infrastructure into your circle jerk vanity project. Don't turn government into that. That's not what it's for. Do it someplace else. You are doing a public service by masturbating or by watching TV and imagining that you're the superhero or playing music and feeling like you're a superstar. Any of that is a public service because you're not doing it in public as an infrastructure vanity project. Um, so yeah, I call it egotainment. Entertainment often has it has art in there, it has wisdom in there or education. But if you get at the essence of this human necessity, I would say we need affirmation. And this comes out of the biological work I do on what distinguishes us from other organisms, and in particular other animals. We've got intense feelings like other organisms do, but we've got language, and language fills our minds with concepts and makes us an incredibly anxious species. I just wish we could acknowledge how difficult it is to be a human being. We're trudging through a sandstorm of mojo eroding possibilities, all the real and imaginary, past, present, future threats and missed opportunities. We are FOMO sapiens. And that's where the Trumpists and stupidity comes in, is that we also through language have a capacity to simplify the world, pretend we've solved it, feel like geniuses, saints, all that sort of stuff. Uh, uh, We crave meaning. Yes, I would say that's right. And also in our work, we have to distinguish between significance, which is there for all organisms, and meaning. Meaning is a language thing. Um, I'd have some trouble distinguishing them right now, but I know that's an important distinction. Things are significant to any organism, down to the simplest single cell. They don't feel it, they don't think it, but it still matters to them enough that they respond to it. But humans seek meaning. Um, and this argument, "Man's Search for Meaning" is the title of a book. I'd say man searches for just enough meaning to feel okay. That is, we're still primarily driven by language. It's not like we have a bottomless need for meaning. And again, this is this thing that can happen. I've seen it happen several times late in life. I'll have someone who's really curious, and then at some point they retire from it. Part of it is my tour of duty is done. Part of it is I'm tired of not knowing. Uh, yeah, one of the earliest mentors I had in this, a psychologist, who was interested in biology and Buddhism at a time when I was interested in that pairing. And we get together and jam, and at some point he slammed me hard. Like, stop asking questions. It blew my mind to see this guy go like this. But I also got it. He was working for veterans affairs in a rural community and he just couldn't take anymore. So again, I get why people would get off the hump of curiosity, why would they would settle out of that. It's just enough meaning for them to make sense of their lives. He was annoyed by the challenges I kept on posing to things that he was comfortable with. Um, I'm not saying they were good challenges. I don't know whether they were good challenges. All I know is think I was treating his answers as springboards to next questions. And he was right with me until he at some point just cauterized it, said, no, no more. And then went to he made a move you're not supposed to do as a psychologist, which is he diagnosed me on the spot. You're not supposed to do that. Anyway, bless his heart. He had a good run. Okay, let's see what we've got here. I'm just taking a look. Is to be aware of temptations is similar being aware of the shadow self. Kind of to know the light one, need to know what the real dark is. Yes, Michael Bradshaw. That's what I'm talking about. It's yeah, that's where I wouldn't put it past me comes in. And yeah, it's another thing I've been playing with this week. I tend to come on pretty severe. So you understand that I'm using Trumpists as my lab. They come on strong. They see my video, or I would bet a lot of them don't see my video because I don't say anything related to the content. They see my thumbnail. They come on strong, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with them. And I'm trying to not do it therapeutically. I'm trying to do it strictly strategically. I'm trying to see if I can eke out any curiosity about whatever they feel like they're acting like know-it-alls about. My tendency is to be severe with them. That is, harsh carrots, harsh sticks. I'm really trying to disappoint them, to humiliate them. But I also have this other approach, which is, for whatever reason, I do believe that compassion and empathy, or empathy and compassion, which I define as putting yourself in someone else's shoes and remembering when they were your shoes, are essential. And that I need a clutch pedal between putting myself in their shoes and remembering when they were mine, and accommodating them. That is, I don't want that to automatically make me accommodate them, just because I can imagine where they're coming from. But my tendency is still to be very severe, to try to humiliate them. And I can see why. That is, once you're in a habit of oversimplifying the world, nothing is likely to budge you out unless it costs you. And in the study group last week, wonderful contributions by this guy. I don't remember his name. I'm hoping he's back this week. from dog training, which is you start gentle, you start positive, you compliment them, you hook them, and only then do you have the receptivity. Because in general, when I'm harsh to a Trumpist in my response, vicious sometimes, um, and not from a place of moral authority, but from a place of just ridiculing them for not being human. I'm trying to demote them to an elevated level of for all humankind. When I do that, they disappear. And I can count that as a kind of victory, though I know that what they're doing is they're jerking off and they'll just go to some vengeance porn elsewhere. You know, they'll find someone else to troll. They're not actually interested in me or any kind of engagement. So more and more, I'm trying to figure out how to use that thing about empathy and compassion to hook them, to reward them, to affirm them, and get them to stick around. And this week I had my first success with that. There was a guy who came on really strong. I'm trying to remember what it was about. It was simply Trump derangement syndrome. And I said, okay, so so what would you say to someone in Russia? I thank you for this. I want to understand what you mean by derangement syndrome. Would you say that someone who disagreed with Stalin, just all the way over at that other extreme, uh, has Stalin derangement syndrome? I'm trying to understand your standards. And he did come back, and he came back dismissive, like you idiots always use extreme cases. Um, this is a funny thing coming from a guy who's talking in the extreme. You know, Trump is talking superlatives. Everybody's the worst or the best. Everything is either the best or the worst. It's very black and white. Um, so, but I got him hooked. So I'm going to be playing more with that, I think. Kyle, hello, Kyle. It's nice to see you. Um, Even though I don't, I only see this picture of you when you had different hair. Um, I've had a lot of people in my life that suddenly just shut down their curiosity. It always leaves me a bit disoriented when they do that. We talked about this one time. I can relate. I remember you talking about these friends, and they're kind of like what I'm talking about. It makes me want to treat new people I meet with suspicion. Well, yeah. I mean, people are the worst. Have you noticed? We're the worst. This adds to the clusterfuck that humans have to deal with. Is that not only are we dealing with all of our threats and missed opportunities, we're dealing with people who are dealing with all their threats and missed opportunities, and just all that anxiety and the. I mean, it's pinball dealing with human beings. It's one of the reasons why I've simplified my life down. Um, you know, at any moment, you could marry someone, and then they go off on one of these paths of curiosity or incuriosity. I would say that Trumpists are curious, but only about one thing: how to teach the world more effectively. I've had several Trumpist friends who I talk to in conversation, not trolls, who say, you know, the only reason I'm arguing with you is learning how to better fight you fools. I mean, they'll outright say that to me. Um, the friendship tends to end shortly after that. Uh, but you know, you're on the same path with someone, and someone that they take a detour, or you take a detour. And when you think about the world we're in now, the probability has gone way up that someone you marry will end up either joined at the hip, and therefore there's a little brain deadness in the relationship's inner dialogue because you both agree about everything, or just tuck in your elbows and make room for each other to just be similar, or um, they'll take on a different lifestyle. And why? Because there are so many lifestyles available now. I mean, this was not a problem 80 years ago. People lived their lifestyle, and it was part of what kept their marriages together. They were all living in a society that had reached saturation and reached a kind of completeness of a certain kind of lifestyle. And so they knew who to hang out, who not to hang out with, and they mostly hung out in their own circle in a way that is very different now. So another thing on my mind these days is the difference between biological and cultural parents. In the old days, your biological parents were your cultural parents. And now with the internet, lots of people they grew up in one family. I was talking to a friend of mine, a Persian Jew, um, who that apple fell far from the tree. And in his case, it was kind of obvious early on that he didn't belong in that he wasn't of his family's culture. And I'm not talking about Persian or Jewish, just his parents were so different from who he turned out to be that he was motivated to go out and look beyond it. So he had a different kind of problem from mine. The apple I am dropped pretty close to the tree that my father was. And I ended up having to deal more with the challenges of extricating myself in establishing my autonomy. But there are some people who are unlucky / lucky enough to have parents who are obviously not their kind, and they go off and find some other culture, for better or worse. I'm not talking about whether it's good or bad, it's just other cultural parents in effect. Okay, let's see. The budging out of MAGA haze could be very costly for all the folks in the U.S., sadly. Okay, I think what you're talking about is very much the challenge we've taken on in that study group. I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned everything before, so sorry. If heroin was so named because it made every user feel like a hero. When you're on it, you feel like a hero. And Trumpism is stronger than heroin. Any groove of self-certainty is extremely strong. So I put out a video maybe a week and a half ago, maybe a week ago, in which I described my experience living on a commune and then coming off of it. And we weren't exactly a cult. I'm quite convinced we weren't. And not in my defense. I'd be fine calling it a cult. I was definitely cultish about it. And I would say many of us were, that it was satisfying us the way that MAGA satisfies Trumpists. And I know viscerally what it's like to give up that source of affirmation and superiority. It's really hard. So that's where I started here. That it's hard to find a groove when you're jonesing for your last groove and you're disoriented. There's no time when you want a groove more than that. So you're not in the best place to do a lot of shopping. You'll take whatever comes your way. And if it's Christianity or Islam in jail or the next hottie who will have you, one way or another, rebound relationships happen. Also, just kind of a central theme that came up this week a lot. People will give up a dogma, but giving up dogmatism, that's way harder, just way harder, for the reason that Michael mentioned. Auto Magic Critic, you're back. I'm glad to see you. Here's another person I am commentating on. A person who says that Norway should adopt English rather than Norwegian, and every country should adopt English because something unity. Well, yes, so there have been campaigns like that before. Now, let's try this out. This is an extreme parallel, because we libtards, we use extremes. I do think extremes are useful for pointing out that a rule is not universal. That is, whenever I read some platitude, some meme, I'm looking for an extreme counterexample simply to remind myself that it ain't always so. Okay, but here's an extreme. There are people, remember I said earlier, I opined therefore I am, who say that the earth is flat. I am not convinced they believe that. I believe that they're having fun getting attention for saying they do. And the idea that Norway should adopt English is not as extreme as that. But to think that that's a solution this relates to another point. I don't want to have conversations anymore where the theme is if I were in charge of the world. If I were in charge of the world, everybody would speak English. It's a fine form of egotainment. It's just not interesting to me anymore. So I have to keep on reminding. I don't have to keep on reminding because people get it, but the study group, it's not an emotional support group, and it's not an if I were in charge of the world group. That's not what we're doing. We're not talking about what the Democrats should do. We're trying to figure out what's the most we can do with what we're dealt. And what we're dealt in general in the study group, which meets every other Sunday. It'll meet again next Sunday. Email me if you're at all interested in joining. We got 110 people who signed up for it. We get about 30 who show up for it. And it's lovely. It's been really productive. Kyle's been part of it. A few people on here are probably part of it. And we're just exploring how to deal with Michael's challenge, which is budging someone out of the MAGA haze. And not just the MAGA haze, because I think this is the universal challenge. This is the 8 billion person question. How are we ever going to prevent people from taking this absolutist position on for any lifestyle brand? And how do you deal with someone who is absolutely lost in it? That is, they are totally relying on that crutch. And if you try to kick it out from under them, which you have to do, they're going to Jones. They're gonna want a rebound relationship. Really challenging, because the alternative to just going for the next rebound, what I call I once was lost, but now I'm blind, is curiosity. Humble human curiosity. So the study group, which I did, just email me if you're interested. We're basically dealing with how do you humbly humble humans who will say and do anything to avoid human humility. Human humility is it's curiosity. It's that, I was in diapers weeks ago, and I'll be dead in weeks from now. We were all in diapers, and this is huge. And we don't actually know what we are, but we would like to insist we know we are, because we need that kind of egotainment. So if we're going to take our legitimate place in the universe, it's going to have to include curiosity, because we're new here. And this place, we didn't come with a packing list. I don't know what I've got in me. I mean, I certainly didn't during my teens. I had no idea. I mean, born without a packing list. And then just when I'm beginning to look at what am I really, I'm going through this ridiculous morphing where I have no idea. I'm a moving target. So, and no wonder people lock in and they decide, okay, I'm this. And it's good for them. They can make a salary that way and raise a family or do whatever they're going to do. It takes a whole lot of conviction to pull anything off in our world these days. A whole lot of dedication and persistence. We can't just be open-minded. I hate that term. I'm not open-minded. I'm curious. I'm curating my assumptions. I'm not open to everything. There's a bunch of things I'm committed to. The way I would frame it for students in classes, I would set this thing up where I'd go out of the room and they'd come up with a list of questions that were designed to be things that I'd be close-minded about. That is, it's very unlikely in my life that I'm going to change my mind about, let's say, gravity or evolution. I happen to believe that it happens. Though how it happens is a major theme in my work. I think that the biological model we were working from now doesn't explain it, but it happens. It's kind of obvious it happens. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I'm closed about, but at least I'm curating. That is, I'm keeping track of my assumptions enough that if one stops playing well with others, I notice the inconsistency. When someone points it out to me, I can't just say I don't. I deflect it, but I don't, it still gets through to me. I'm still kind of stuck, I think. Certainly not across the board. I'm definitely stubborn about lots of beliefs. And I'm confident that if I could look back from another 100 years, I'd recognize that I was wrong about shit tons. But I recognize my place. And in a way, what it takes to be curious is that you have to identify as learning, not learned. And what I see in the Trump is that they're learned out. They're burnt out on learning, and so they're going to pretend they're learned. And that's what I think Trump has unleashed on the world, is a completely unearned claims of learnedness, such that they come on like the president of the American Psychology Association and diagnose you as having Trump derangement syndrome, which is something they made up, which simply is defined as anybody who, what it comes down to is anybody who disagrees with Trump has a bias against him. That's prejudice against him. That's founded on nothing but prejudice. We're prejudiced against them because we disagree, because there's no other possible explanation for why we would disagree with something so obviously right. Okay, let's see. The way I understand flat earth belief is that it started out as ironic and attracted people that became real believers, and grifters too, who benefit somehow, of course. So I try to hold myself to the standard. I never want to say a Trumpist thinks or a Trumpist believes so and so, or a flat earther believes. I can say they feel, they act like, but I can't say think or believe. And this is because I'm trying to hold thinking as curiosity. You could say rationality, which is based on the term rational, meaning that you're weighing the pros and cons of different options. And I certainly don't believe that rationality solves things, because if someone's goal is to become an authoritarian dictator, they can weigh the pros and cons of different options for how to do that. But what you're describing, Barry Gillis, is is something that I think is also true to some extent of QAnon, is that they're just fucking around. And then at some point, they realize that they can get attention for fucking around. And so they fuck around as if they mean it. As if. But I don't think they're thinking. I think it's about the attention they're getting for it. Uh, and who knows, the same may be true for me. The only reason I don't worry much about that is that I see how much time I spend confused. Uh, that is, I mean, I swear I could write a counter argument to absolutely everything I write. I could make the opposition's case for them convincingly. I still believe it enough to say it, but at least I'm paying attention to the opposite possibility. Um, and I'm operating on the assumption that that I could easily have spent my entire life barking up the wrong tree. As a researcher, I could just end up being either wrong about the world or bad for the world. So an example of that is I am convinced that my pacifism helped foment the Trump movement. That we made it easier for authoritarians to come into power. If you think about the era in which I was being a pacifist, there were still a lot of World War II vets. They knew better. They knew that a society has to defend itself. They knew that a defensive weapon can also be used for offense, which is also the point about love and kindness. You know, the Germans after World War I claimed that they were building up their arsenal for defense. The problem is they're all double-edged. Um, so yeah, it's easy to. What does it take to convert a weapon into a offense? Nothing. It doesn't take much. Okay, so let's see. And I feel like there are many parallels with the current extreme ideas that seem to take ground. Barry, you're on the point I'm making about this epidemic. That is, the world has gotten more complex and people are bonking. I don't mean the sexual version of it, I mean the sports version of it. They're simply running out of energy to deal with it. And so there would be this great migration towards certainties, and they would be cults and countercults. There's every cult is likely to breed a counter cult. Catholicism, Protestantism, Sunni, um, Shia, uh, um, communism, libertarianism. To me, this is that I once was lost, but now I'm blind thing. That's a thing where you give up a dogma, but you don't give up the dogmatism. And so, yes, we're in for a lot of they are also pretty good at restating the received wisdom from the okay. I think what you're saying is that the Trumpists have mastered that they feel as though they are aligned with the broligarchs. Um, and so the received wisdom is from them. Uh, and this is fascinating to me. So they humble themselves before the Lord so they can lord it over everybody else. Um, and it's really hard to break through that. I had that out with a Silicon Valley Trump supporting friend of mine this week who said, who's got a major hard on for Elon Musk, um, and uh, and thinks that business solves everything. That it's everything should be a business. Government should be a business. I asked him this week because with him I'm gentle. I asked, what do you know about market imperfections? Which is a standard idea in economics. That is, markets don't solve everything. Externalities would be an example of that. That is, a company spewing its waste, but not having to pay for its own messes. It was a standard marketing procedure. He didn't know much about it. He talked about imperfect markets, which is a different thing in economics. Um, but so yes, we're dealing with people. I think of Trump as the first demagogue. That is, he has taught people that you can be a raging success by being completely dumb. Now, one historian friend challenges me on that. He thinks that Mussolini did that too. He doesn't think that Hitler did that, but he does think that Mussolini did. So I have to go study more about Mussolini to understand what his rhetoric was like. And you're at a huge advantage doing that these days because I don't know if you've seen this, but they have these wonderful AI versions of Hitler's speeches in English. So it's got all the inflection and all of what he's saying, and you're watching the visual of it. So I just have to go watch a little bit of Mussolini that way. But one way or another, Trump has really taken it to the extreme, and so it makes every idiot feel like a genius. Um, yeah, so they are good at that. The reaction was to you saying you don't think they really believe it. The point is that it's a mix of people who believe it and the ones who pretend to believe it, and probably anything in between. This gets to a major challenge that, to some extent, I have to sidestep while realizing it's a problem. So, are they crazy? Are they crazy like a fox? Um, uh, can they see through their own bullshit or not? It would be really helpful if we knew, because it would inform our strategy. For example, I don't want to come on to someone, I don't want to come on strong to someone who's just innocently going with the flow, education deprived, didn't get much education, grew up in a culture where, no way in the world would they survive. Uh, would they be able to put food on their table if they disagreed with the MAGA culture they're part of? I don't want to come on to him the same way that I come on to someone who is a leader of that movement. Um, so I'd really like to know what's going on with them. But this is a fundamental challenge in psychology in general, is that we don't have any objective way to find out what's really going on in someone. There was an attempt years ago to simply ignore internal life. So this was the behaviorist move in psychology. So since we can't actually know what's going on in people, let's only treat them like input-output devices. That's all we know is how they respond to rewards and punishments and all that sort of stuff. It was abandoned. We kind of got to know what's going on, and yet at the same time, um, uh, we can't know. So mostly I sidestep that. And often I assume that it's animal braying as papal decrees. That is, but they have, there's another core concept, which is you are more likely to be convincing with a lie if you believe it yourself. So to Kyle's point here, yes, it is both at the same time, I think, often, which also relates to the two-faced way they behave. They slam you for not living up to moral standards and laugh at you for caring about moral standards. Um, and I think of this. So take the solo narcissists, not a member of a cult, but the absolutist whose only cause is cause I said so. So I think of it as a split personality, and neither of which are their true personality. So what they've got is they are holding on to an idealization of who they are. They are playing hero or playing God. But they're also playing God's fiercest defender. And so that's why you would get this combination from them of acting like they're above the fray, they're God, and they lay down the moral law. And also, carving you a new ass if you challenge them at all. They're just vicious. So that's at the heart of this distillation, no deed too dirty for a saint like me. And it's also there in the concept of holy war. So a solo narcissist is going to be engaged in holy war. Holy is I'm God. And war, there's nothing dirtier than war. It's by far the dirtiest human behavior ever. And so you get this interesting split in them, and it's hard to tell who you're talking to, and they switch it up fluidly. You could say that's what Trump has taught them: is you don't have to care about consistency. You have to care about claiming that you're consistent because consistency sounds hella good. It's a loaded term. You want to have integrity. So all you've got to say is I have integrity, and then you're free to have no integrity at all. So it turned into a statement the other day. It's hard to judge people on the content of their character when they have none. And in a way, they have none. That's what's going on, is they've disappeared into this suit of armor, the spiked suit of armor. So the armor protects them because they're God, but it's spiked. No deed too dirty. And you can't find them. So in a way, what the study group is about is, okay, you're encountering, these are not emperors who are wearing no clothes. These are an empty suit of armor. And you're trying to figure out how to find the vulnerabilities in their armor where you can coax them into re-existence. These people who have disappeared into an opinion, or how to rattle the shit out of it to get them to come out, and everything in between. And I do not have the formula. I do not believe it is a formula. I believe it's a repertoire, depending on who you're dealing with and whether they're crazy or crazy like a fox, or innocent evil, or how far up the pyramid scheme they are. That's one way I think about it, is that the higher you are on the pyramid scheme, the more you're crazy like a fox. So, Kyle, to your point, yes, it could be both at the same time. I think it is, and they're slippery as fuck. They're just all over. From what I see, they are doing something algorithmic, which is I will jump to any position, any description of our interaction where I win and you lose, and it doesn't matter what it is. They're not paying attention to content. Can you imagine what a liberation it was if you could turn your emotional animal braying into papal decrees like that? Like you are in charge of the world? I mean, what human wouldn't want that capacity? That's what curiosity is up against. That's why it's hard as hell to become intellectually bi-curious, meaning you get interested when you hear opposite positions. You get paradoxophilic. That is, you're interested in paradoxes because there's something to figure out from it. So when I hear myself talking out both sides of my mouth, that's my next insight. I'm going to find something there. But It's not because I'm a moral person. It's not because I'm a good person. It's because I'm safe enough to do that. And I'm paid for it. And most folks aren't. And in a way, the ideal for university was to prime the pump, to help kids get over the hump into lifelong learning, endless curiosity. I don't think it works that way much anymore, but it can. And it did for me because of dumb luck, just who I got to hang out with, and this kind of succession of one after another who would tease me out of um, my troubles. Here's an example. I mean, I had brief dealings with Ram Dass. He was a guru, and he had his own ideologies and all that sort of stuff. But he was an interesting character. He was of Jewish descent and brought some of his irony into it, and would tease me, and I could tease him back. Um, so, at one point, I described what I was doing to him, and he said to me in a slightly sarcastic way, "You're a good person, aren't you?" Oh boy, that was he was basically tempting me with flattery. And then at one point I teased him and said, "Is there room at the top for more nobodies like you?" Uh, and he laughed. Okay, so that's an example of someone who was like that. But also, there's another example I should bring up from Ram Dass, which was at one point I go over his house. It's just a one-on-one. The two of us are going to hang out, and he's boasting about having come up with the line "Be here now." He was the guy who coined that. He wrote a book called that, and it got very popular. So he was definitely feeling chuffed. He was definitely proud of having come. He was telling me, I saw that they used it the other day like that. And then he went on to say to me, you know, I'm just interested in people. You could swap out all my friends tonight and give me a whole new batch of people tomorrow, and I'd be totally fine with that. It was his version of non-attachment. A few years later, he has a stroke, and I asked him if he had what he thinks about that now, and he said, "I never said that." Okay, so his memory versus mine, I don't know, but that's another example of at some point you need to check out. The best girlfriend of my life, the romantic love of my life, not my research colleague, who it turned out to be the real love of my life, was this astonishing woman, um, uh, who we had such a sense of humor and irony together, and she was smart as a whip, went on to very big things, got very ill, and became, at that point, there was no more teasing. She got very ill, and at that point, she got hypersensitive. I would guess that something similar might have happened for Ram Dass, and I'm saying that's a human thing. It could happen to me at some point. I wouldn't put it past me, but it's happened in a way to the Trumpists. Whether it's indulgent or they just got scared into ideological position or stance, um, they can't take it anymore. And once you get on that gravy train of saying whatever bullshit to feel like you are the authority on the world, like you've solved reality, it's really hard to give it up. It's an incredibly addictive drug. And I have to take it seriously that way. Okay, so where are we here? I wish I had the go along to get along gene missed out on the slave gene. Yeah, too, and it's cost me dearly. Um, Yeah, and it turns out I don't have that as much, though I think it's mostly because I have a life where I've been able to get away with speaking my mind. Um, I don't think that's because I'm brave. I think it's because I'm safe. Uh, it's been very rare in my life that I had to be kind to someone, had to accommodate someone in order to keep food on my table. And that's just a very weird situation. And I have to keep on remembering I don't know what it's like to be a normal human being right now. Most people don't have that luxury. And most people don't live in Berkeley where you're actually paid to be curious. But uh, it's still the reason why I retired from partnership is that I'm too mouthy for it. I say I'm glad my lack of appetite finally caught up with my lack of aptitude. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at tucking in my elbows. I've decided to spend my advantages on mouthiness, on saying what I think and not speaking truth to power. I don't have truth. I have honesty. I'm trying to be as honest as I can about what I think, knowing that it's not true. Okay, so anyway, um, let's see. If I miss something, let's see. Uh, Miss Blabberina. I love that name. That's what we were just talking about, Miss Blabberina, is that I tend to be a blabberina. Uh, in case you haven't noticed, an hour and 10 minutes in here. We'll go another 20 minutes. I'm doing this weekly now. I do this every week and will until people lose interest. And then I'll go back to doing it the way I normally used to do it, which is it's all conversations in myself with a spattering of audience. But this is the first time I've had actual people who would show up like this. We need to feed the healthy wolf, stop feeding the mentally split personality wolf. Great question. Yeah, I think you're right. Uh, and how to feed the healthy wolf and also stop feeding the other. There's carrots and sticks in there. And I think all I got is carrots and sticks and distance. I can walk away, I can be assertive, or I can be accommodating. And I just mentioned that I tend to lean towards the assertive. Not just out of safety, I also think time is short, and that we've used up about most of the Earth's carrying capacity for us humoring each other. We don't just have to get along with each other; we have to get along with reality. And so how to deal with the split personality? The split personality. I'll remove the term wolf. Well, no, not necessarily. There's something hungry about us all. That's what I was talking about earlier. That is, I think of us as like hummingbirds. Hummingbirds have to eat nectar every 15 minutes to stay alive. We need to do that about reassurance, affirmation, and the like. And while you might say nonsense, I don't need that. I'm saying we're relying on it. It shows up when it shows up, the hungry ghost I'm feeding is being fed all the time by things that I now take for granted. So this is one of the challenges about human anxiety is that it's a black market. Affirmationomics, the supply of and demand for affirmation is a black market. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want it would be buzzkill for us to admit how much we need buzz. We need to not feel needy. So yes, I'll keep the hungry wolf in there and the healthy wolf. But what is a healthy wolf? Well, to me, it's someone who masturbates. To me, it's someone who watches movies or plays video games and slaughters 1,000 people virtually. That's feeding the wolf in a healthy way. I know that sounds weird. It's a person who goes to church on Sunday but doesn't pretend that they've solved reality except while they're in church. I feel like I've solved reality when I'm watching a James Bond movie because I'm James Bond in that movie. So I'm solving the world's problems. I'm saving the world. But then I turn it off. Then I zip up and get back to reality. So that's what I'm selling as the healthy wolf. There is an art, and so this is why I'm now ending up liking your term, the healthy wolf. I am a wolf. I am hunting for affirmation, like everybody. And a healthy wolf knows how to eat. It's strangely like empty calories. It's strategic gullibility. You're feeding yourself affirmation you need, but you're not letting it go to your head. And once again, that's all I'm talking about here. So to me, I have increasing disdain for people who treat their egotainment at church um, as superior. But when I talk to someone who knows it's fiction, like the James Bond movie I watch, or like the porn I watch, um, I have great admiration. So this is this distinction I make between belief and relief. So if I'm talking to someone, I've learned this actually in communist China. I was hanging out with a friend there while I was on a lecture tour, believe it or not. They let me go over there. Um, uh, and he said, "Oh, no, of course I'm a communist. You know, I wear the team jersey and I go to my communist meetings. I have to do that. And I like it. I don't think it has any relevance to reality. But so this is basically what he's saying is, I believe in scientific progress. This was a scientific researcher, but I believe in communism. So I would say the same. I believe in scientific progress, and I could say why I would choose that, even though some people say, well, if you've got another cult, then it's just another cult. You know, you're just another religion. I could go into why I believe in scientific progress because I think it's the best attempt so far to think carefully and get our egos out of the way, even though I deal with all sorts of egomania within me and other scientists. You know, we beat our chests. But the system overall, scientific progress, kind of puts a premium on um, intellectual bicuriosity. You're paid to counter each other to some extent. The system is breaking down in practice, but I believe in it, and I believe in James Bond movies. It's no different. So what I'm trying to do is take the highfalutin forms of egotainment like church and demote them to an elevated level for all of it. I do not see much of a difference between masturbation and church. And I admire them both. So I'm not just saying, well, church is masturbation. I'm not using it in that dirty sense. I will use it that way with Trumpists. I will talk to them about their circle jerk and their man crush. I am trying to, when I'm savaging them, that's what I'm trying to do. And once again, that's based on the strategy, don't attack their weaknesses, attack their strengths. They consider themselves macho and independent and all that stuff. So I'm really trying to take them down at the knees. They depend on that. Okay. Let's see. So that was some answer to this question. And just to tie it into something else, relief through egotainment. There's two versions of it. Sorry, I coined these terms. I hope they're helpful. One guy told me this week, naming things, new terms never teaches anybody anything. Fair enough, that's his opinion. Me leaf versus we leaf. So the relief of feeling like you're part of the crowd and the relief of feeling like you're an independent thinker. So to me, flat earthism is just, it's me leaf. It's like, I'm a different thinker. Look at me. I think I don't go along with the flock, as a way to get attention. Okay, church makes self-idealization into a virtue. Yes, it has definitely been a groomer for the Trumpists. And so this is the fundamental question in theology for me. It's not for most of the what they call apologists, the defenders of religion. But yeah, for years we've operated on the assumption that church makes people more humble. It doesn't seem to be working that way now, and it makes us wonder whether it ever did, or how much it ever did. Let's see. Hold on a second. Jesus, what did I just do? I hope I'm still there. Oh, here I am. Yeah, I wrote a limerick about it this week. I was just going to look up here. About what we humble ourselves before. I think I shared it on YouTube too. I like limericks because they're short and they're informal, and you can get a whole idea across in them. So if you like the occasional puzzle, here's something I recommend for all you curious people, is when you have an idea, grab it. You only get 30 seconds before you'll forget it, and then turn it into a limerick. They're really easy to write. You need one word that rhymes 3 times and one word that rhymes 2 times. So here it is. It's called Humble Before What? And I was trying to play off of Turn Down for What? To end all this dumb rough and tumble, On 3, let's all try to get humble. Before powers divine or some God-playing swine, know just life, or it's going to crumble. So humbling oneself before the Lord or the demagogue or the demagogue is not actually humble at all. It's the opposite of humble. It's and what do we have to humble ourselves before? The fact that we were in diapers 15 minutes ago. That we haven't solved reality. We're not anywhere near it. And some of the most vocal claims of having solved reality are the ones that are the most to be distrusted. They may be great therapy. They may be great unifiers. There are cultures, when I go down to Mexico or Guatemala, I'm grateful for the civilizing effects of the church, even though it is slave mentality. But it has at times created civility, but not civility with people outside of it. And it's a dangerous kind of civility. It's humbled before a lord, slave. Let's see. Religion is like ego masquerading as humility. I agree. That's what I'm saying, and that more and more so. Oh, you you bought it. You name it. You bought it. You named it. Um, I'm sorry you're late too, because I'm taking roll. We took roll at the beginning of this class, and I might have to dock a few points. All right, so we're wrapping up. Someone, if I missed anything, or if anybody wants to bring up something new, we have time for one more thingy, one more thingamajig. Anybody got anything? Well, you know why? You know why you don't have something else? Because I am the complete package. I have solved reality. Your silence, your stunned silence is evidence. Oh, shit. Eric R. just wrote something. Now, so you mean I haven't figured it all out? I used to think that atheist conservatives were more dangerous politically. Discovering evangelicals changed all that. So atheistic conservatives, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Um, uh, uh, so I'm an atheist, but I'm a different kind of atheist from a lot. And there is a way. So in the origins of life research, I'm up against people who are experiencing what we in our circle call the perfect storm. You get the discovery of DNA, and you get the explosion of computers, and then you get AI, and you get this sense that we've solved it. It turns out the entire universe is run like machines, and that we're machines too. That I'm just a machine created by my DNA. And DNA is this binary, it's basically a software program. And these are really important artifacts. DNA is an important internal tool, but it is not a living thing. It's a molecule. It's a record that we argue in our research had to show up after you already had a living being. So we do a lot of research on the pre-Luca end of the spectrum. But there's this sense in culture-wide that we are just machines. And to us, there's a radical difference between a machine running an algorithm and a living being that has to keep on regenerating itself. And besides, it is not algorithms. It's not even box and arrow models. Those are our models of it. It's not computation. It's fuzzier than that. For an example, my mind is the opposite of a computer in many ways. The neurons are firing constantly. It's not like one part lights up and gets active and the other parts are dormant. It's not like that at all. And it's incredibly hair trigger what's going on inside the brain. But there is this general sense, and it plays off of the same human intuitions we had when we believed that we were God's puppets. And all of the psychological advantages you get from that, which is don't blame me, it's all God's will. we saw that show up. It's not my fault. It's in my genes. So you got these extreme versions of it, like Robert Sapolsky these days, who was a very thoughtful researcher, but has gone all the way over to we're just machines. And a lot of the people on Sam Harris have this implication. And I'm saying it's also playing into the Trumpists. So you had a kind of atheistic conservative who said it's nothing but selfish genes. And this is kind of a move towards the feral side of humans. Like, what happens if you stop with civilization and trying to do what's good for us all, and you just say it's a dog eat dog world? Okay. And then you say it doesn't mean shit because we're just algorithms. And then you put a spiritual overlay on it. So it was fascinating. When I lived on my commune, we were using all of these engineering terms, engineering terms. Good chemistry, good vibes, good energy. Those are physical things that are not trying to do anything. So what do we mean by good? I understand why we would have that intuition about it, but it doesn't at all explain who we are or what we're doing or our sensitivities. And this is also where you get the advantage of the if I were in charge of the world thing you see from Trumpists, but also from my leftist buddies and all of that, which is let's just engineer the right algorithm for society and everything will run smoothly. So there's an idealism about that it's all straightforward. And it shows up also in what we're talking about earlier, which was the moral algorithm. Here's the truth. Always be kind. Don't bother to define kind. Just know that it's hella good. All of that appetite, what I call robo-envy, the envy we would have for robots that don't end up suffering the kinds of sensations we deal with. They don't get discomfort, and they are completely modifiable to suit our tastes. So there'd be a way in which we wish we could just reprogram our annoying partner or the Trumpists. I could just go in and reprogram them. So there is a kind of dangerous atheistic conservatism that worries me plenty, and I get shit from them. If you ever want to look up, there's one atheist dogmatist biologist, way better biologist than I am, who wrote us 2 articles. The second one provoked. I wanted him to write another one that says Jeremy Sherman doesn't understand evolution. You should look them up. They savage me for not understanding that it's all just algorithms that natural selection, like it's selecting, like a god, chooses. So this is kind of like the central dogma among most biologists. That's an example of the atheist. And while I love Christopher Hitchens, I love his style, and I love Sam Harris's books on the subject, I think they're wrong. I think that they're sidestepping, by equivocation, they're not making the distinction between an algorithm running on a machine and a living being that is struggling for its own existence. I think they're dodging that question. Okay, one last thing so that I don't done. What is the best concrete action a person can take to stop of certainty? Mike Raskin, I invite you to join the group where we're trying to figure it out. And it's not the best concrete action. I don't know about that. I have friends who are involved in the politics of how we're going to change the Democratic Party. Not many anymore, but I do have people like that. And we don't know. We're in a period of fibrillation. That is, we don't have a pulse yet on the Democratic side about where to hammer away. But the study group that meets every other Sunday, it'll be next Sunday at 9:00, and I'm still trying to figure out whether that's the best time for folks, is people trying to figure out exactly the question, concrete action person can take to stop the insanity of certainty. We're dealing with it at a modest level, one-on-one interactions, online or elsewhere. It's not about, once again, it's not about how to save the planet or what we would do if we were in charge of the world. It's not emotional support. We don't sit there. We don't have time to sit there and talk about how terrible it is and why it's the media or why it's the internet or why all wonderful conversations. We're dealing only with your question. How do you humbly humble someone? There's You could savage them, but you're doing it from a place of your own curiosity. You're trying to invite someone or push someone into some curiosity. How to humbly humble people who will say or do anything to avoid human humility. For that, we do what we do in this session. It's an hour and a half too. It's not uh yeah, it goes that long. And what we're trying, my ideal for it is that people bring in examples of their interactions with Trump family members, people they know. They describe what they've done. We evaluate, we find what worked and didn't work about it. We're just trying to learn at that basic on the ground level. And it's free, and I'm not upselling to anything else. It's just people wondering about your question, and not in the abstract. We're trying to keep it way grounded on the ground. And while the focus is on Trumpists, we're also not, it's not exclusive. We're not interested in the lifestyle brand. We're interested in what happens when you're dealing with the insanity of self-certainty. Okay, so there is that. I also want to say, because um, if anybody's, my two specialists as a strategic consultant are dealing with someone like that one-on-one. That is, if you're partnered with, or your boss, or your whole family is stuck in that kind of insanity of certainty, we tailor strategic strategies for dealing with your particular person. That's what I do as a consultant. And I have just fabulous clients who are trying things out. And what we're doing is figuring out, well, okay, what mix of carrots and sticks and taking space will work in your situation, given who you are and given who you're dealing with. And then the other is anybody who's dealing with the anguish of doubts. You're on the fence about something and they've been on it long enough. There's a kind of coaching where I help someone tease out and clarify their ambivalences, and then relax into that doubt enough that they can pick a bet for what to do about it. Because from my perspective, consciousness is not a computer, but it wants to create habits. It wants to create algorithms. We need lots of habits. So those are two services, and I offer a free half hour up front, and then I kind of sliding scale on my fees beyond that. I think, by the way, Timothy Snyder, I adore his work. I think Timothy Snyder might say that they need to be brought from their fears into valuing positive freedom. I don't know if he'd say that, but if he did, I I don't know what valuing positive freedom is. Um, they want freedom. I have not met a movement that doesn't want freedom. They all want freedom for themselves. I have not met a movement that does not have hope. Uh, it's hope for themselves. So remember that. I'm going to end with this thing. You know that Chinese fortune cookie trick where you add in bed at the end of it? I hope you know that one. It's worth trying. Do this to anybody's pronouncement of what they want, of what their global cause is, what they're trying to bring about. Like, I value positive freedom. Add for me at the end. Uh, yeah, okay. And I still, yeah, I'm gonna leave it with this. We'd have a lovely conversation. I hope you come back, Anne San E. Um, my ex-wife is Anne, and she goes with E at the end, no E at the end, or an IE at the end. She's completely flexible about that. Um, we would have a longer conversation. I'd love to talk with you about that. But our time is up. I don't like to wear out my welcome. Um, so but I ask you to think about this if you're willing, which is, lots of people want that freedom. We want to be unconstrained by society. Um, we want workarounds for society. We want to be able to cut corners on laws and things like that. And this is true of all of us. Uh, yeah, and it's easy to say we want it for all of us. The way I trivialize that deliberately is to say, I like ice cream. And I do wish the whole world would have ice cream for all. And I feel swell about saying that. But actually, if I had a choice between ice cream for me and ice cream for someone I don't know far away, I'll choose me. I like it that much. It's not true. I will give an ice cream cone to a needy person occasionally, but my point is to put that "for me" at the end of such pronouncements. I do not think that it's easy to lure people into freedom to be free from external constraints. Freedom by definition is freedom from external constraints. Uh, uh, it's built right into the concept of free will. Will is actually constraint. It's internal constraint. I'm not the energy I eat. It's how I channel that into effort. Okay. But there are external constraints. And by the way, I don't buy the idea that we want freedom from external constraints. We often hire them. We want the right external constraints, not the wrong ones by our standards. Trumpists are very happy being externally constrained by all of their dogma. So I don't know that he would say that. If you're willing, and email me a section where you think Timothy Snyder says that, or point at least to the book where you think he picked that up. I don't bet that he would say that, having read maybe 3 of his books. But I could be wrong about that, and I also don't buy it. I don't think that it's as simple as that. One way sorry, last thing. I want to be rubbed right, not wrong. Let's see. I want to be rubbed right the right ways, not the wrong ways. Think about this in terms of partnership. And I want to be rubbed wrong the right ways, not the wrong ways in partnership. Now, I don't want a partner who doesn't constrain me. I want her to constrain me in ways that that support what I want, my internal constraints. As I want to become a doctor, she supports me in that. I don't want one who constrains me the wrong way, who is disappointed whenever I get to my priorities. And this would be true of a job, it'd be true of any kind of external constraint. I want a partner who is disappointed and constrains me when I reach for my 5th glass of alcohol. I don't tend to drink alcohol, it's not my drug, I'm a stoner. But I'm using this as an example. But I don't want someone who indulges me. No, who scolds me for doing what I want to do, but I don't mind a partner who constrains me that way. So I don't think it's as simple as the description where there's positive freedom and we want freedom from external constraints. We want a mixture of external constraints. I want the ones that keep me in my groove. My groove is my external constraints. And I don't want to lose the ones that feel like a groove. And I deal with this challenge, which is sometimes a groove is also a rut. Okay, maybe people are asking because they want. Yes. I'll just end with this. Shirley Crane, yeah, I think a very common prayer is God grant me one good reason for what I want to do. It's been a pleasure. I only wish we could all could yammer at each other. That's what we do in the study group that meets every other week. And you just email me if you want to be on the list for that. No obligation. I don't take roll. It doesn't cost anything like that. You dip in, dip out, whatever. And otherwise, I do this once a week, and you're at an unfair disadvantage. You're constrained by the technology itself, which allows you only to type. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.